Chapter 742. Watanabe remained silent. It was rare for the youth to be so serious. What's wrong? Nothing. Watanabe was probably analyzing how he would deal with that move. After his analysis, he laughed. It isn't bad, but it isn't impossible. The maneuver wasn't flawless, but once he thought it through, it wasn't that bad. The youth couldn't understand why he was concerned about the captain of the revival match. The only thing he wanted to see was the skills of the person who had beaten him on the Japanese server. Of course, he didn't think he was that good. After all, his teammates weren't his true comrades, they were the preparatory team. But he couldn't deny that the maneuver in his memory was indeed cool. As the youth thought this, he tilted his head and his back couldn't help but tremble. The vice-captain wasn't sleeping, he was watching the match. This was too strange. One had to know that when attending such events, the vice-captain would usually sleep. Supreme Alliance won this match. This time, Watanabe's interest was piqued. He placed his arm on the railing, his fingers sliding across his lips as he watched Shin Mo move the mouse. Such a person, even I feel like going down to fight him. Hoshino lowered his lids, following his gaze. The youth spoke softly, Watanabe, hurry and shrink back, someone is looking at you. How troublesome, I should have worn a mask. Watanabe was helpless, pressing down on his cap and shrinking back. At this moment, he wasn't afraid of female fans. He was most afraid of male fans. After all, there were more guys who gamed. Once in the game, there were more guys who would watch the video tutorials. As a face that kept appearing in the tutorials, Watanabe was more likely to be recognized by the guys. The chances of Watanabe being recognized by the guys was much higher than the girls. Otherwise, the few otakus sitting over there wouldn't have turned around to look at them frequently. The youth was slightly worried. Shall we leave? We just started and you're asking me to leave. It wasn't easy for him to come out for a break. Besides, Watanabe found the captain's playstyle interesting. The youth was depressed. We came out behind the club's back, if we were to be discovered. They'll blame me. Hoshino's voice carried a hint of a smile. The youth was shocked again. The vice-captain had never been like this before. The vice-captain he saw today must be a fake. It's over. Watanabe's eyes flickered with the light of a hunter. How long did it take for him to win? The youth wasn't interested. What about it? The opponent is too weak. If you go up and fight a little more seriously, you'll be able to win in such a short time. When he said this, the youth completely forgot that when the person played the game, one hand was obviously assisting. In other words, this wasn't Shin Mo's true ability. After the match, the person on the other team took off his headphones and was very dejected. He thought about it and said, Almighty Shin, can you give it your all in the next match? Shin Mo paused. All right. Just one word. He had to admit that he hadn't used his full strength just now. Actually, Almighty Shin, at this time, you can be a little more sophisticated, like praising me. He admitted it so straightforwardly, but his fans are watching from the side. Shin Mo glanced at him. You are good at sneak attacks, just be careful not to get killed. That person. Chapter 743. The screen was still replaying the match. The 2v2 team had already stepped forward. Yunhu and Lin Feng. The Yun and Feng couple, the most compatible duo. The opposing team saw the name list. They stood up immediately. Don't bully them just because they are nerds. How dare they say they aren't here for revenge? From the 1v1 to the 2v2, they were using their strongest lineup. What exactly were they trying to do? Actually, Supreme Alliance wasn't planning on doing anything. They were just considering the competition rules. The revival match was different from the National League because it was a round robin. Hence, if they won the 1v1 and 2v2, they wouldn't have to fight the 5v5. This would reduce the pressure on the team members and save time. In the end, there was only one sentence: don't talk, just do it. The opposing team hated their bad luck for being matched against Supreme Alliance at the start of the revival match. Their captain was an old member of the circle. Before the competition started, he sent a message to the Alliance's group chat. Zi Xiaopao, Supreme Alliance, don't you dare to go easy on us. That was what Zi Xiaopao meant. Even if they couldn't beat Supreme Alliance in the competition, they had to win in a verbal battle. Zhao Sanpang liked to join in the fun. The battle is starting. Old Z, I bet no one from Supreme Alliance will reply to your message. Lin Chintao replied directly, 200. 300, the lazy voice of a goddess replied. Bo Jiu lifted her lips. She sent a video over and typed a few words. God Z, you're being too polite. We've always been giving in, there's no need to talk about whether we dare or not. Z Xiaopao, Xiao Sanpang, F*CK, Little Spade, how can you be so heartless? 100, Almighty Fatty, I'm fine with either a red packet or a bank transfer. This time, it was a voice message. Xiao Sanpang was defeated and could only give away his money. This had always been a joy in the Alliance's group chat. Zi Xiaopao, honestly, how strong is Qin Mo? He didn't even use his full strength today. That will have to wait until he meets me. Xiao Sanpang let out a long sigh. I understand. He's always looking forward to having an opponent like me. After all, we're mortal enemies. He can't beat me in terms of looks alone. Zi Zhanpao grabbed his hair. He must be crazy to come to the Alliance chat. But to be able to fight against such a strong Supreme Alliance, in fact, he was very happy. It was also a good opportunity to let those people under him know that there was always someone better than you out there. Unsurprisingly, they lost the 2v2. Everyone in the team was a little crestfallen. Zi Zhanpao patted one of the members' shoulders. If we can't do it this year, let's try again next year. Hearing this, the team member's eyes lit up. Yes. He was not afraid of losing. He was afraid that he would be blamed if he lost. However, in a good team, there was no such thing as complaining. Supreme Alliance won this round quickly. It was almost like this kind of aura. He won all 3 matches in a row. One could imagine how excited the fans were. It would have been a happy thing. But there was just one thing that seemed to be wrong. Lin Feng glanced over, watching as the youngster lowered her head to play with her phone. On the other side was their captain, who was drinking water. However, neither of them seemed to have taken the initiative to speak to the other, right? Was it an illusion? What was wrong with them? Chapter 744. Before Lin Feng could ask, Bo Jiu stood up. Bo Jiu had already stood up, her left hand pressing down on her slender neck, twisting it to the right. It's finally my turn. This person's personality was very compatible with her appearance in the battle uniform. The zipper was never willing to be zipped up properly. It was half opened, revealing the white t-shirt inside. Her entire body followed the youngster's movement, tall and slender. The key was that this wasn't a big deal. In an instant, it caused a commotion in the stadium. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because there was a line of small words written on the t-shirt. Supreme Alliance. Hey Tao. The back was written in pinyin, the font was beautiful black regular script. At the back of the black regular script, there was a green ribbon emblem. Everyone knew what the green ribbon emblem represented. This was a concept that the Spade fans had decided on when they first established the fan club. Fan club wasn't just for show. They tried their best to do positive things. But why did this t-shirt? The girls in the official fan club stood up. Before they screamed, they covered their mouths. That's our fan club's. Yes, that was the one-time fan club t-shirt that every Spade fan would wear. No one expected the youngster to wear it herself. If they weren't fans, they wouldn't understand how it felt. Besides, the youngster turned her face and smiled in their direction. Her eyes were bright, her teeth were white, and her eyes were deep. Because she liked someone too much. Hence, it was really hard to forget how that person looked when he failed. In the same esports arena. Not long ago. The youngster stood there, covered in wounds. She was splashed with coke, disgust, and despised. No matter how strong a person was, he would never let you see his wounds. When he came back again. Paw! There was a crisp sound of the keyboard. The moment the game's special effects started, the people saw the person on the screen sweeping towards the opponent like the wind. The assassin rushed out of the light, handsome and dazzling. The youngster sitting in front of the computer had an earphone cord around her neck. Her clean and fair side profile looked extremely handsome. Her pale thin lips were curved into a smile. Her pair of eyes seemed to be staring at the screen lazily. Her expression was calm and composed under the scattered light of the screen. Her eyelashes were dyed with arcs. Those arcs were very eye-catching. Whether it was those who liked her or those who didn't. As an esports player, the hands on the keyboard were so fast that no one could see where they landed. One hand switched between the small picture and the big picture. When it was broadcasted on the big screen, it was a series of switching scenes. The shoutcaster was dumbfounded. So fast, how was he supposed to nag? Some people said that playing games depended on equipment and levels. Chapter 745. The baby-faced youth in the audience stood up uncontrollably. Even Watanabe's gaze deepened. Then he broke into a smile, turning towards the person beside him. No wonder Vice Captain is so concerned about Spade Z, so that's the reason. That move just now should be at an international level. Supreme Alliance is indeed a hidden talent. Initially, he had only come to take a breather. But now, Watanabe felt the need to conduct a detailed technical analysis of Supreme Alliance. Is that him? The youth was still talking to himself. It was obvious that he was shocked by her actions. However, no one here felt it as deeply as Hoshino. The person sitting beside him wouldn't be able to tell that when he glanced at the youngster's hands, Hoshino had tightened his grip on the keyboard. He hung his head low, and his black hair fell on his face, forming a shadow. The corners of his mouth were curling up, until it rose to the warmest and most brilliant angle. There was no mistaking it. Only Z could do that kind of hand speed and penetration. Hoshino looked up again. No one could understand the sparks dancing in his eyes. As the word victory was used, the young man sitting in front of the computer took off the headphones on his head. His messy hair did not make him look out of place. Instead, it made him look handsome. However, no one knew why the youth paused. Bojo paused. That was because she always felt that someone was watching her. From this angle, he could see a dense crowd of spectators. Could it be an illusion? Captain, even if Little Spade's love for you is too obvious, you should hold it in. He's still young, right? Just treat it as another Chin fan. Your fans love you as their husband. Little Spade is just the closest to you. You should let him have it first and he listens to you. It's weird that you guys don't talk to each other. It would have been better if Lin Feng hadn't mentioned this. At the mention of this matter, Chin Mo, who was holding a bottle of mineral water, tilted his head and glanced at him. His gaze was extremely cold. He listens to me. The voice that came out from his thin lips was also cold, but there was another layer of indescribable coldness. It would be great if he really listened to me. When Qin Mo turned his head to light his cigarette, Lin Feng could see the corner of his lips. It seemed like he was smiling, but it seemed more like he was pressing down. But no one saw it clearly because when Qin Mo smoked, his gaze became much colder. Lin Feng thought to himself, "Little spade, this is all I can help you with. You still have to rely on yourself for the rest." Unexpectedly, when the young man came back, he sat there and asked for a bottle of water. He didn't say anything. He only glanced over at them for a moment. Lin Feng shook his head, leaning over to say, "Little spade, you aren't yourself today. In the past, when Captain pulled you in public, you didn't resist." Chapter 746. Sure. Lin Feng felt that he could understand the feelings of someone who had a crush on someone else. How about this, I'll put it another way. Is it your fault or his fault for what happened today? Bo Jiu took a moment. It's mine. Wearing female clothing had the opposite effect. Lin Feng looked as though he had seen a ghost. What did you do to Captain again? Did you try to rape Captain when you were in the same room as him during the variety show but he rejected you? Is that why you two ended up like this? Every word from Lin Feng seemed to strike at the memories she didn't want to recall. Just like that night on the variety show. She didn't want to think about it. The moment she thought about it, her mind was filled with the Almighty's breathing. She remembered how the Almighty had held her hand and moved her lower body. That burning gaze and panting breath. It seemed to burn her ears even now. Especially when the Almighty had said, "It's hard to not be tempted when you see me like this." He had taken the initiative to pull open his black uniform. When his white shirt was half open, his abs could be faintly seen. Those unforgettable smooth lines also appeared at this moment. Her canine pet. It was mesmerizing. It was a pity she couldn't bring him home like when she was young. That was it. She couldn't go any further. It wasn't suitable for her or the Almighty to go any further. It wasn't suitable for her to have friends. She had encountered far more darkness than light in her life. There were many people with ulterior motives. In this circle, no one could comfort you when you were hurt. They all wanted you to fall. The remaining ones with a conscience won't refuse to help you, but they will also cut off contact with you at the same time. When you were famous, they would appear and call you brother. Bo Jiu had seen her fair share of such people. Not to mention those beasts in human clothing that she had sent to prison. Only that person. The pet she had wanted since she was young. Even though she knew it wasn't suitable for them to be friends. She wanted to hold on to something. Bo Jiu lowered her eyes. The moment she did so, a bottle of eye drops appeared in front of her. She couldn't be wrong about those familiar long fingers. Her body trembled. Other than the bitterness in her chest, there was a warmth she had never felt before. At this moment, Bo Jiu was filled with regret. If only he knew that he wouldn't have the chance to do anything to the Almighty after he grew up. She should have pounced on the Almighty more often when she was younger. He took the eye drops. I don't know what to say. He still didn't break the silence. Lin Feng rejoiced at the fact that he had competed very quickly in these 5 matches. Especially when it was a 1v1, it was either the captain or Little Spade. He didn't know what was going on with the two of them, but they were killing their way through. Chapter 747. Of course, there was a replay. But no one had expected it. Even with Spade Z's presence. The MVP of the entire match was still Qin Mo. But it wasn't strange since there was a 2v2 match. Almighty Qin had Baby Phone watch from the side while he challenged the opponent 3 times. Actually, Baby Feng didn't want to watch, but he couldn't keep up with his captain's speed, so he pushed the tower over. In the end, he took down the city. This way, Qin Mo's kill count was higher than Spade Z's. Of course, that wasn't the only way to evaluate the MVP. There were other contributions. The audience noticed it too. Even though the kill count was the same, the two of them were different in other aspects. When Almighty Qin was killing, he had pushed down 1 or 2 defense towers. His output was different. Looking at the string of numbers, even for the players of the pro teams, the only thought that flashed through their minds was admiration. But there was one person who wasn't. He was sitting among the audience, but unlike when he was on a variety show, he wasn't wearing his uniform this time. Instead, he wore a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles and a black mask. The esports industry is really different now, heh. He laughed softly. His words were overheard by the person sitting beside him. Why? Still nostalgic. Even though he was here to watch esports, he was holding onto a book that only a criminal psychologist would read. His long black hair brushed past his fingernails that were dyed red. The light blocked his face, making it hard to see his features. Rao Rong pushed his spectacles up, the lenses reflecting the light. How could that be? You don't know why I'm back, it's all for revenge. Of course I know, but I'm not interested in such a competition. He closed the book. Why does he like to play such a game that doesn't match his identity? He should have come out earlier to play, don't you think? Rao Rong tilted his head. According to his personality, he should have forgotten about you long ago. No, you don't understand him as well as I do, or rather, no one understands him as well as I do. He cupped his face with both hands, his eyes smiling, but it made one feel uncomfortable. There was a sweet aura around him. Rao Rong didn't say anything else. Because there was a point. He couldn't say it out loud, but he had to admit it. When he saw Qin Mo controlling the character to lower his stance and sweep, his bloodline stirred. However, it was only for a moment before it disappeared. Esports. His blood was boiling. He was just an existence that would abandon his teammates once they were no longer useful to him. Rao Rong looked at his hands, the light blurring his expression. According to convention, one of the winning team's captain or vice-captain had to be interviewed. It was impossible for Almighty Qin to accept an interview. The media went straight for Bo Jiu, the long-legged youngster. The host led Bo Jiu to a quieter place. Chapter 748. F***CK. Where did Vice Captain go at such a critical moment? The youth was also stunned. He quickly glanced over, gesturing for Watanabe to head towards the left exit. This was also why he had chosen to sit here. It was the closest to the exit, which was the best guarantee for them. Although the youth was also a member of the Japanese, he wasn't as recognizable as Watanabe and Hoshino. He raised the popcorn in his hand, blocking his fans. Watanabe took the opportunity to press his cap down and dashed over. He had used the fastest moves in his life to hide from his fans. Thinking about it, it was really sad. Moreover, he hadn't expected his knee to hurt so much when he knocked into the chair. Hiss. Watanabe inhaled sharply, hugging his leg as he ran forward. He didn't seem like his usual playboy self. But when he reached the exit, he saw a figure at the end. Vice Captain, why are you going there? That's the interview room, not the exit. Watanabe thought that the person in front would turn back after he shouted. Unexpectedly, that person did not slow down at all. Instead, he completely disappeared around the corner. Watanabe gritted his teeth and looked at the baby-faced man behind him who had been squeezed out of shape. He didn't care so much anymore. Anyway, the vice-captain's Chinese was good, and he wouldn't get lost here. At most, he could just ask his agent to come and get him. He couldn't hold on any longer, he had to retreat. Watanabe's name caused a huge reaction. Even the female fans didn't know, looking at each other in confusion. But the male fans and the professional teams knew. Watanabe. The Japanese are here. How is that possible? It's just a revival match, why would they come? If Xiangnan were here, they could come and watch the match, but this situation, what do you mean by this situation? Are we that bad? We'll talk about that later. Are the Japanese really here? The officials were alarmed. The shoutcasters were already in a daze, and now they were even more confused. Who could tell them what was going on? The media couldn't let this opportunity slip by. All of their cameras were aimed at one spot. Some people had already run out from the other exit in order to block the exit. One could imagine how chaotic the scene was. At a time like this, the only ones who didn't change were the Supreme Alliance. Lin Feng's arm was still on Yunhu's shoulder. He had no intention of letting go. Originally, he was talking to his best friend about Little Spade and their captain. When he heard the explosion, he frowned. Watanabe. The Japanese main force. Looks like it. Yunhu's gaze landed on the man's chin. He had just drunk some water, and when the water droplets flowed down his chin and condensed into water droplets, he really wanted to kiss him. Lin Feng was a naive person. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't notice it. It was the same this time. What do you think they're here for? Are you here to seek revenge from Little Spade? For what happened on the Japanese server? Not really. Yunhu furrowed his brows. A certain someone was too close to him, her breath hitting his neck. It wasn't easy for him to tolerate it. Lin Feng was still talking to himself. Qin Mo, who was walking at the front, paused absent-mindedly. Lin Feng almost knocked into someone. If Yunhu hadn't stopped him in time, Lin Feng would have crashed into him. Captain. Lin Feng didn't think he was in any danger. He wasn't Little Spade, and if he had really bumped into Captain, with his misophobia, he would definitely have increased his training. Qin Mo turned back, his face handsome, his voice calm. You guys leave first. Lin Feng watched as his captain turned around and walked to the other side of the venue after saying that. What was going on? In the audience, Rao Rong tilted his head and asked the person beside him, "Is it time for us to leave?" That person smiled and stood up. When he blended into the noisy crowd, his eyes were dark. In the entire venue, the quietest place was the interview room at the end of the safety tunnel. The MC was passionate, but it was a pity that the interview was only a few words long. It was a pity that he couldn't chat with the youngster for much longer. Bo Jiu ended the interview. That's basically it. Thank you, Big Spade, for accepting our interview. Just like all the fans, I'm looking forward to your performance in the National League. The MC kept the microphone. Bojo chuckled, stuffing one hand into her pocket while the other was putting on her white earpiece. Both the MC and the cameraman froze on the spot. They looked towards the entrance, their eyes widening in disbelief. It wasn't because of him, it was because of the figure walking over from the other side. Since she was an MC in the esports industry, she had a strong understanding of the almighties in the game. She had applied for 5 interviews with the person in front of her, but the only answer she had gotten was, "Sorry." Now that she had finally seen him in person, her emotions were unimaginable. Hoshino. International sports player. The most valuable player of the year. The top player in the world. He had the speed of a gentle knife. These were all words used to describe him. But when she saw him in person, that was when the MC realized why people didn't compliment his skills while praising his looks. He was too handsome, so handsome that she didn't know how to look into his eyes. But right now, there was a question in everyone's mind. That was the famous almighty Hoshino. Why was he here? The MC was undoubtedly excited. She felt that this was a rare opportunity. She picked up the microphone and wanted to interview him. On the other hand, after Hoshino entered, he didn't look anywhere but at the youngster's face. His gaze was deep and unwavering, as though they were familiar with each other. I know, it's you. Bojo hadn't expected to see Hoshino here. When she received his gaze, she was startled. Her gaze flickered, then her lips curled upwards, not avoiding him at all. It was a silent acknowledgement. It was a tacit understanding between them. This wasn't a good place to reminisce. There were people around. In reality, according to Hoshino's usual style, he wouldn't have approached the youngster directly. He didn't care about anything. But this time, it was different. He was really afraid that that person would give him a negative answer. Because he was most afraid that there would be no traces of that person in this world. Almighty Hoshino, let's have a chat. When Bojo said these words, she had already taken a step towards him, her lips lifted and her brows raised. That was the person in Hoshino's memory. Even though the hair color and age didn't match. But everything was right. When she asked this question, the youngster didn't forget to send him another message. Pay attention to the left and right. That was when he had helped Z cover up. Both of them would give each other hints with their eyes at the ball or on the streets. This time wasn't an exception. Hoshino nodded slightly. The two of them walked in tandem. Just as the crowd was still in shock over their relationship, Bojo brushed past them and took the magnetic card from the host's pocket. It was used to unlock the door. After she and Hoshino left the interview room, she reached out with her left hand and pressed it against the sensor. When the door closed, the MC and the cameraman snapped out of their shock. Their first reaction was to follow them and film. But when they pushed the door open, they realized it was locked. Why was it locked? Electromagnetic card, the cameraman reminded the MC. The MC reached for her pocket and realized it was empty. The cameraman watched as she searched through her pocket and frowned. What's wrong? My card is missing. From the MC's expression, she hadn't noticed anything when Bojo brushed past him. The corridor wasn't a good place to talk. But at least it was better than the interview room. They stood facing each other. The sunlight shone through the windows. Everyone walked to the other side because of Watanabe. No one would come to the interview room. Hoshino glanced down at the person in front of him. Bojo smiled lightly and was about to say something. She had already been pulled into an embrace. The voice was clear, warm and soft. It was so soft that only the two of them could hear it. Long time no see, Z, it was a hug from a good friend. Bojo could clearly hear the emotions in his voice. She couldn't help reaching out and pressing her hand on Hoshino's back. She didn't say a word. Both of them seemed to need to use this kind of method to celebrate their long-awaited reunion. However, in the eyes of others, such a scene was not the case. It was a hug as though there was no one else around. It was a look of telepathy. It was a closeness without any ill feelings. This made Chin-Emo stop in his tracks. If there was anyone following behind him, they would be able to feel the coldness emanating from his back. No one dared to move. Amidst the interweaving lights, Chin-Emo stood there with his back straight. His posture was so casual that it could be used as a poster. His deep eyes were clouded by a thin layer of gray mist because of the scene in front of him. There had been signs before. The earliest was on the streets of Tokyo. After seeing the advertisement that Hoshino had filmed, that person's emotions had clearly fluctuated. He had gotten someone to investigate. But there hadn't been any actual interaction between the two of them. What kind of existence was Hoshino to a certain someone? Now he knew. That person wasn't gay. But the person wasn't him. Chin Mo's gaze was cold as he flicked the cigarette between his fingers. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him moved, making him look like a devil that could summon a group of demons. He was elegant and cold. There wasn't a single bit of humanity in him. The sharp Bojo could sense his aura. The moment she glanced up, she saw someone watching her from afar. That person held a cigarette in his hand, his slender fingers emitting a faint light. He stood there with a noble posture. For the first time, there was no smile on his face, only indifference. Even his eyes did not reflect anyone's shadow. His eyebrows were thick, his nose was high, and it was hard to get close to him, the Almighty. Before Bojo could take a closer look, Chin Mo had already turned around. Chin Mo had already turned around and was striding forward. The unapproachable aura behind him spread out in an instant. It was indescribably cold. Bojo stilled. Did the Almighty see everything? Hoshino sensed the pause in the person in his arms. He turned and looked in the direction she was looking at. There was nothing. Was there someone? Hoshino asked. Bojo nodded slowly. Based on the scene just now, the Almighty must have misunderstood her relationship with Hoshino. Could she use this opportunity to get rid of the Almighty's feelings for her? That was good too. Bojo lowered her lids, clenching her fists. This kind of misunderstanding was better than the Almighty finding out her identity and thinking that it was all a lie from start to finish. It was only a matter of time before she crossed swords with the Almighty. She was the most sinful person on his list. He was the criminal psychologist she needed to be wary of. They weren't supposed to have any interactions. It was just that it was too comfortable to be by that person's side, so it lost its original sense of danger. After all, no one would protect her like a brother. She had never seen Z with such an expression. Although the corners of his mouth were smiling, his eyes were filled with unknown emotions. Was it because of the person who had just appeared? Hoshino glanced in that direction again before retracting his gaze. His gaze landed on Bojo's face. He spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. This isn't a disguise. Finally, the question had come. Bojo didn't know how to explain it to anyone. No one would believe her even if she said it. Even she wasn't a believer. How could he believe in the resurrection of the dead? But that was indeed the case. This isn't a disguise. She lowered her voice, listening to the footsteps that could no longer be heard. Her eyes shifted. Hoshino frowned. If it isn't a disguise, what is it? You look young, a high school student? How did you look 5 years ago? How did this happen? Bojo knew that no one would come near them. After the Almighty left, there wouldn't be any reason for him to return. As long as she lowered her voice, no one would be able to hear her. She reached out and pressed against the wall behind Hoshino, lowering her gaze. On the surface, it seemed like she was closing the distance between them, but in reality, it was 100% safer position. Because this isn't my body. Bojo's tone was heavy, every word pressing against Hoshino's heart. Hoshino, I died and came back to life. When I woke up, I was in this person's body. I was reborn. Chapter 749. Dead and alive again. Reborn. Hoshino released the youngster, his gaze still wavering. So, you are now someone else's body. Bojo glanced out of the window, her side profile handsome but confused. I don't know what I am now either. Boom. Lightning flashed outside the arena. The light from the collision shone on the youngster's face. She was standing in the darkest corner, but she stuffed a hand into her pocket, her smile never fading. Do you need me to prove my identity? No need. Hoshino looked at the person in front of him and digested the information he had received. Gradually, his gaze became gentle again, but there was something else more than that gentleness. Dead and alive, what did that mean? More importantly, what did it mean to be dead? Hoshino clenched his fists. He couldn't imagine a world where humans no longer existed. Don't look at me like that. Bojo took another step forward, her brows arched. The new identity isn't bad, it's a perfect disguise. I haven't been a high school student for years. Hoshino finally had the mood to look at the youngster's attire. Wait a minute, this body is a boy. Bojo lifted her lips lazily. Age is too confusing, it's a pity the body is still female. But not many people know that the original owner has something to hide. Why are you so restless everywhere you go? It was obvious that Hoshino had fully recovered. He was even glad that he could still see this person. Bojo smiled. I want to know the answer to that question too. I'm already in this state, how can I still be restless? You're talking about Z. The two of them were worthy of being partners in action. The moment Bojo opened her mouth, the intelligent Hoshino knew what she was talking about. It seems like you're investigating. Even though the location wasn't the best, the most important thing was to convey the message to each other. Hoshino's eyes darkened. At first, I thought he was you. Then, a forum appeared, and you sent me an email. I rejected that idea, but it was too late by the time I realized it. There was no way to lock onto his IP, and other than imitating you, I couldn't find any trace of him. How come there are no traces? Bojo glanced sideways at the door that was about to be unlocked. Once again, she sighed. This wasn't a good place to talk. Imitating me is a trail. Hoshino, do you remember what I told you before? A criminal's trail is always left on his every crime. Who is the first victim on the forum? Where is she? Perhaps some people would say that the further the better. The culprit is definitely not in the province or the city, but you and I both know that this is not an ordinary instigation. He chose a person to be the maiden's sacrifice, and it was not a random choice. I have a feeling that the person who impersonated me is in Zhongqing. If we find out why he impersonated me, we will be able to find the most important clue. Bojo remembered that she was still under the Almighty's tender care. When she heard the door open, she glanced up. It's not convenient for me to make a move now, you can investigate. Go straight and turn left, you can avoid the fans. Hoshino looked at the young man blocking his way and knew very well that this was the end of the conversation. The two of them really had a tacit understanding. Even Adjutant Zhang didn't know what it was. Because in the next second, Qin Mo walked towards the commercial car. Lin Feng was sitting on the far left. When he saw this scene, he immediately opened the door and jumped out. This was also one that didn't need an umbrella. Yunhu frowned. He unzipped his uniform and with a twist of his wrist, he covered him from head to toe before alighting the car. Chapter 751. When Lin Feng ran to Qin Mo's side, he was still looking behind him. He scratched his head in confusion. Captain, where's Little Spade? Just now, Lin Hu had told him that Captain had asked them to leave first because he wanted to look for Little Spade. Since that was the case, shouldn't they have reconciled? Why did Captain come out alone? Who knew that after hearing his words, the captain would stop what he was doing and turn around to look at him with a coldness that had never been seen before? Lin Feng stilled, thinking that it couldn't be, they hadn't reconciled yet. Captain, I know that sometimes, Little Spade's way of expressing his feelings is too direct and you definitely can't take it. It's reasonable for you to reject him, but the atmosphere between you two is really affecting other people's relationships. For example, I'm completely hopeless about relationships. When Yunhu heard this, he turned to look at him. The other couple was at odds with each other. Why was this guy so desperate? Really, it's fine to reject him. Lin Feng sighed. But Captain, don't be angry at little Spade. Even if he slept with you, you have to forgive him. He didn't hold back and Captain definitely wouldn't let him take advantage of you. When little Spade comes out, hit him a few times to appease your anger. He won't feel good after being rejected by you. The water droplets splashed onto Qin Mo's elegant face. Even his black hair was pressed down, making it hard for others to see his expression at this moment. But Lin Feng wasn't sure if his captain was really angered by little Spade because his back stiffened. He wanted to say something more. A slow and low voice sounded in her ears, as if wet in the rain. I'm the one who was rejected. Whoosh. Lin Feng and Yun who looked up at Qin Mo at the same time. That person stood there with his back straight. If one looked closely, they would notice that his uniform, which was known as the most handsome in the esports arena, was completely drenched. The ends of his black hair were dripping with water. His fingertips, which had never been stained with a speck of dust, had been cut by something, and blood was flowing out. Lin Feng had never seen his captain like this before. His black hair blocked his eyes, and he could only vaguely hear him repeating that sentence. I'm always the one who gets rejected. Lin Feng's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. After all, everyone knew that Spade Z had joined Supreme Alliance for a reason, and that reason was their captain. And before little Spade came in, he had already confessed to his captain. No matter how he looked at it, little Spade should be the one chasing him. He tilted his head to look at Yun Hu beside him. Yun Hu's expression was very serious. It was obvious that Yun Hu's acceptance was much stronger than his. In fact, he seemed to have already known about the clues in this matter. Lin Feng thought about it and still couldn't accept it. He needed to calm down. Most importantly, how could Captain be gay? You must be joking. What did it mean to be rejected? The way little Spade looked at Captain, it was as if he wanted to take him home and raise him. Why would he reject Captain? Chapter 752. Lin Feng really couldn't accept such a setting in such a short time. He felt that there must be a misunderstanding between the two of them. But his mind was in a daze. Who could tell him why his captain suddenly changed his taste and fell in love with a handsome young man like little Spade? What about the girl that his captain had kissed? Why do I always feel that everything is weird? But even so, Lin Feng didn't say anything after they boarded the car. That was probably how teammates were. They could sit together and chat, but when it came to something deep in their hearts, they wouldn't say anything. Lin Feng glanced at Qin Mo, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. He was still wet and had no intention of wiping away the traces. His eyes were closed as though he was resting, but when the water droplets slid down his handsome face, it didn't seem like he was resting. On the contrary, the entire commercial car seemed to have fallen into an ice cellar. Coco hugged his bunny, pinching its ears before moving towards baby Feng. Just as he was about to speak, he realized that the person he found wasn't that strong. He moved to the left, to Yin Weo's side. Baby Feng looked at him in confusion. Coco gave him a look that said, "You don't understand." Captain was about to activate his freezing technique. Baby Feng used his gaze to ask, "What does that have to do with you moving closer to me and suddenly moving away from me? I have to find someone who can protect me. I should be the one protecting you." The two of them communicated with their eyes and could actually understand each other. Baby Feng immediately became excited. He pulled her to his side. "Who said I can't protect you?" Yin Wei watched as the two children touched each other. He wanted to go down for a smoke since the atmosphere in the car was a little. What was wrong with the captain and little captain? As expected of an older person, they understood the situation. But it was useless. The driver bit the bullet and started the car. The person beside him reached out and pressed on the steering wheel. Chin Mo's fingers were indeed beautiful, long and clean even though they were wet. Wait for him. 2 words. He didn't say who he was waiting for, but everyone in the car knew that he was talking about Bojo. At that moment, the man's pale fingers were almost transparent. Lin Feng finally believed what he had just said. Because at this moment, he was still thinking about the person he was waiting for. Captain against Little Spade. It really wasn't as simple as liking him. It was a pity that Bojo didn't know someone was waiting for her at the main building. In addition, it would take some time to avoid the fans and the media. Moreover, the road leading to the entrance of the main building had already been taken by the fans. It was obviously unwise to go out now. Chapter 753. Watanabe's situation wasn't looking good, especially when he turned around and saw the media chasing him. He ran even faster. It was raining outside and he would slip from time to time. If the fans chased after him and something happened, it would be even worse. That was why Watanabe urged Hoshino to hurry over. He really couldn't hold on much longer, but if he stopped, he would face more trouble. First of all, he didn't have a manager or bodyguard. He would really be torn apart by the passion of the fans. Hoshino glanced over and glanced at the scene through the railings. He didn't put down the phone in his hand. His voice had a calming effect. From now on, run towards the main road. The faster, the better. Vice Captain, are you serious? You want me to go that way? There are the most fans there. Although Watanabe said that, his body had already started moving. He made a turn and successfully got rid of the fans behind him. Without his hat, he could only hope that the people behind him would stop chasing him. Hoshino raised his hand and glanced at the time. Then his voice rang out again. Run faster. Watanabe was definitely listening to his vice captain. He was counting on him to bail him out. I'll count to 7. Run to this side of the road. There will be a car waiting for you. Hoshino said as he pressed down the window. Then he turned to the driver. Sir, please stop the car and turn on the flashing lights. Okay. The driver lived in Jiang City and had experienced many things. There were many celebrities who held concerts in Jiang City, but even so, his passengers were ordinary people who came to watch the concert. It was the first time a celebrity sat in his car. That person should be a celebrity. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people chasing after him. 3, 2, 1. As Hoshino's voice fell, he reached out to open the door on his left. Seeing that, Watanabe immediately jumped in and slammed the door behind him. He panted. Almost, I can't make it. Sir, drive. Hoshino didn't speak to him immediately. Instead, he asked the driver to start the car. The fans who didn't catch up to him stood by the side of the road, shouting Watanabe's name. This scene was not difficult to see. Especially the Supreme Alliance members who had parked the commercial car at the main building. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows. The Japanese team really had a close call this time. Without a manager or any official notice, he dared to appear in the audience. He was quite a character. However, is the person in the car helping him? Looks like the Japanese aren't the only ones here. Lin Feng's words did make sense. But other than Chin Mo, no one knew who was in the car to receive Watanabe. When the cars brushed past each other on the other side of the road. The car window was open, so people could clearly see the person sitting inside. He was handsome and had a gentle temperament. In the esports circle, almost everyone knew him. He probably noticed our gazes. Especially at this time, the MPV parked here usually belonged to the team. That person turned his head to the side, and his voice and appearance were all revealed to everyone, even though it was only for a moment. Hoshino. Everyone knew that Hoshino was Coco's favorite esports almighty. Now that he had seen him in person, even though it was just a short scene, his emotions were stirred. Hoshino is here too. Coco couldn't believe it, his eyes lingering in the direction where the taxi had disappeared. Shui Yaoyao didn't know much about the esports circle, so she couldn't understand Coco's emotions. She probed, is Hoshino strong? He isn't just strong, he is insane. My almighty is especially handsome when he is gaming. Coco couldn't stop talking about his former idol. This is strange, I remember he never watches competitions. Besides, he would use any time he has to sleep. Why is he watching this revival match? Even if the Japanese wanted to visit Big Spade due to the incident on the Japanese server, he wouldn't have to show up. This is strange, this is really strange. Listening to these words, Qin Mo's eyes remained closed the entire time. His entire being gave off an icy aura. The water droplets were gone, but there was still a faint dampness on his chiseled face. His hair didn't seem to dry easily. Lin Feng glanced at his captain before turning to the exit. There was still no one. There wasn't a reply to his voice message either. After about 30 minutes, Qin Mo spoke faintly, let's go. It was another 2 words, but the temperature in his voice was completely different. It was another 2 words, but the temperature inside was suddenly different. Lin Feng was worried. He glanced at his phone, but there was still no reply. Lin Feng was a little worried about this. He looked at his phone again, but there was still no reply. What exactly was Little Spade doing? Bo Jiu was indeed busy. And this favor was completely unexpected. She had turned a corner to avoid the fans, but she hadn't expected to bump into the captain of Lin Qintao's team. Bo Jiu retracted her body instinctively, pressing her back against the wall. She tilted her handsome face slightly, watching as he spoke to a girl before walking in another direction. Bo Jiu chose to follow him. She couldn't help but be concerned about his actions during the show. Bo Jiu had switched her phone to silent mode when she had noticed him. Unexpectedly, she didn't discover anything else after following him for the entire journey. But there was one thing she was sure of, he wasn't just highly vigilant, he was also good at hiding. Moreover, he had done all of these things subconsciously. In her previous life, Bo Jiu had played many cat and mouse games with the police. Her greatest advantage was her anti-surveillance ability, which meant that Rao Rong had the same ability. Bo Jiu had noticed it the previous time in Lin City. After following him for the entire journey, Bo Jiu was almost certain that he was doing it subconsciously. Bo Jiu narrowed her eyes. This wasn't something a player who had just returned to the esports scene should have. Unless he wasn't as simple as the Almighty, Bo Jiu watched as he waved for a taxi. It was difficult for her to follow him because she couldn't catch up in time. But that was enough. If she continued, she would be discovered and it would be counterproductive. Bo Jiu started to think about the girl he had met previously. She had only asked for directions. Since that was the case, why was he so guarded against her? The rain was getting heavier. She didn't have the time to think about such things. Since there wasn't a taxi, Bo Jiu turned and pulled out her mask. She wore her uniform inside out and followed the few people into the subway station. After being drenched in the rain, it was really cold. Especially at this time of the year, it was easy to feel cold. After Bo Jiu bought the card, she had just warmed up when she stuffed her left hand into her pocket when she saw 3 missed calls. It was Lin Feng. Bo Jiu sent him a message when she was going through the security check. 10 minutes later, she received a reply. Lin Feng called Qin Haodong. Hello. It wasn't easy to find a seat in the subway, but she didn't intend to sit since she was still dripping water. Lin Feng sighed. Little Spade, you finally picked up the call. What did you do just now? You didn't pick up my calls and we waited for you at the main building for more than half an hour. Bojo paused when she heard that they had waited for her. I thought you guys would leave after the party. Originally, Captain asked us to wait. With that, Lin Feng paused. He didn't tell Little Spade everything that Qin Mo had told him. Bojo froze when she heard the answer, her grip on the ring tightened. Some things didn't need to be discussed further. She knew what he wanted to express. Bojo recalled his back view and clenched her fists. She seemed to be enduring something. In the end, she didn't open the page to send a certain message. She didn't send a message, but that didn't mean others wouldn't. Qin Mo hadn't returned home. Just then, Director Huang called, his tone stern. Hurry over to my place. That's right, there is something you need to take a look at, no one here can solve it. It wasn't a bad call for Qin Mo, he needed something to do to divert his attention. The atmosphere in the crime squad was obviously different. From left to right, everyone had a solemn expression. Director Huang personally brought him into an isolation interrogation room. Do you see the person inside? Director Huang pointed at the glass. Qin Mo's side profile was pale, almost translucent and handsome. He seemed to be hinting for him to continue. Director Huang sensed something amiss with Qin Mo, but he couldn't be bothered with it right now. This man has somehow been infected with AIDS. Director Huang glanced at Qin Mo. Right now, she still feels like she wants to take revenge, but she can't get anything useful out of her. Instead, it's getting harder to control herself. You and I are both aware that AIDS can't be contracted out of nowhere, but I've checked her social circle, it's pretty clean. Qin Mo glanced at the fashionably dressed girl sitting inside. His gaze swept over the Gucci bracelet on her wrist and the entire set of Swarovski jewelry, then her shoes. What's her family background like? It's all right, it's pretty ordinary. Director Huang looked into his gaze. You've noticed that too, right? That's right, she likes to buy light and luxurious items, but I've done some research and she doesn't have a bad job. Even though it's tough for her to buy these items, she still buys them for work. It's just that she has to eat buns and drink cold water for an entire month after buying one item. It's normal for girls to be like this. Qin Mo glanced up. Her social circle is simple, her occupation is clean, she doesn't have a history of blood donation and there aren't any infected people around her. Have you checked her social circle app? His words were like a bolt of lightning that jolted Director Huang back to his senses. Director Huang turned his head, instructing his subordinates to get to work. In reality, the crime squad was usually very smart. But it wasn't something that they wouldn't have thought of. There wasn't a problem with QQ. There wasn't a problem with WeChat either. That left other social circle apps. In reality, Qin Mo suspected that the victim wasn't telling the truth. Ever since he had entered, that person had glanced over more than once. Her actions were extremely irritated. Other than uneasiness, there was also irritation and a vanity that could not be changed. Qin Mo could almost imagine what kind of person she was. She wasn't worth saving. If it had been him, he wouldn't have chosen to save her. But the life and death of some people shouldn't be decided by anyone. Director Huang had been ordering his subordinates to do this and that, but when he turned back, he saw Qin Mo's pale face. Even the color of his lips had changed, causing him to jump in fright. What happened? F***CK. Someone, come quickly. Qin Mo leaned against the wall, holding his forehead with one hand. His voice was steely. Get Deputy Zhang up. Director Huang had never been ordered around by anyone. Of course, that didn't include Qin Mo. Deputy Zhang's expression changed when he saw his young master's state. That was when he remembered that his young master hadn't changed out of his clothes after being drenched in the rain. In that case, even a body made of steel wouldn't be able to take it. Moreover, his young master had an old injury on his wrist. Deputy Zhang didn't say much, reaching out for Qin Mo's arm to drape over his shoulder. In reality, Qin Mo's pride didn't allow him to be in such a pathetic state. It was only after he got into the car that he truly lost all his strength. Even then, his gaze was deep as he looked at Director Huang, enunciating each word. Pry open her mouth and get her to speak the truth. This isn't as simple as it seems. Director Huang knew she was referring to the person locked inside. He nodded solemnly, reminding him to take care of himself. After that, Qin Mo couldn't feel anything. Other than his thirst and body heat, even his breathing seemed to be boiling. Every inch he exhaled increased the heat. He placed his hand on his forehead, as though it would make him feel better. Many images flashed through his mind. Most of them were from when he was young. Those scenes were messy and there wasn't a single timeline. He couldn't even see the exact image. But he could vaguely remember that there was always someone who liked to push him down. As a boy, every time he wanted to throw someone out, he found that he couldn't lift that guy at all. That feeling was too intense. It was so intense that he couldn't remember anything when he tried to hold it back. Qin family's inner courtyard. Movie queen and wasn't around. Deputy Zhang watched Qin Mo lying on the bed, feeling a wave of self-blame. The doctor stood by the side, following the vein on the back of Qin Mo's hand, inserting the needle. He also knew that he couldn't leave at the moment. He lowered his head and thought for a moment. Then, he typed a WeChat message and sent it to a certain someone. Compared to him, Boss Qin would rather that person take care of him. Bo Jiu was returning a call when she received the message. Lin Feng picked up the call quickly, sighing deeply. Little Spade, you finally appeared. Where did you go? Why didn't you pick up the call? I had something to settle at the last minute, so I left for a while. Why? Bo Jiu held her phone with one hand, the other pressing on the subway card. She was still in her uniform, her silver hair still wet. She stood there undeniably dazzling. A few high school students who had just finished watching a movie couldn't help glancing over, their eyes filled with shock. So handsome. Even though the youngster had walked far away, the people beside her could still hear the two words. Lin Feng heard the sound too. Where are you? It's so noisy. Subway. Bo Jiu glanced over, trying to find the direction. Ah! Lin Feng exclaimed. You went back by yourself. Captain waited for you at the main building for more than half an hour and even got drenched in the rain. He seemed a little uncomfortable after that. Uncomfortable. The moment she heard this word, Bo Jiu's thoughts of investigating something faded. She stopped in her tracks and asked Lin Feng, where are you uncomfortable? Of course, his heart was uncomfortable. But this wasn't something Lin Feng would say, so he stuttered, since I'm not feeling well, why don't you give him a call? Bo Jiu didn't even bother to say goodbye as she hung up. Young Master Lin looked at his phone screen with a dumbfounded expression. Was there really such a fast speed? Bo Jiu's fingers swiped. Just as she was about to press the number, she saw the WeChat message from Feng Yi. The content was simple. Almighty Qin is having a high fever and there's no one around to take care of him. I can't leave. Bo Jiu didn't say anything, stuffing her phone into her pocket. She didn't care if it was raining or not, just running out of the subway. Like the wind that no one could stop, the people standing in the rain watched as the young man held onto the railing with one hand, flipped over and landed in a handsome manner. It was as if he was filming an action movie, the hem of his clothes dripping with raindrops due to the fierce fling. Those who didn't know better would have assumed it was the police solving the case since their movements were too fast and professional. How should she put it? The wall-jumping student was already beautiful when she flipped over walls, much less a road railing. It wasn't just the passers-by, even the taxi driver thought she was carrying out an order, driving quickly and enthusiastically. The military compound wasn't far from Bojo's place. Especially in a place like Jiang City, if there was a traffic jam, the driving time would be even more uncertain. After about an hour, the taxi had just reached the military compound. It was already 10 p.m. If the weather was cold, there wouldn't be many people on the roads, even in Jiang City. The night sky was getting darker and darker. At the same time, in a remote county near a third-tier city near Jiang City, a bright red Ferrari stopped in front of a county hospital. It was still raining outside. The roads here weren't as smooth as in Jiang City. When she alighted, Wu Zhen's first reaction was to frown. "Are you sure it's this place?" He Honghua, that village girl, came from here. "Of course it's correct." Su Mei alighted, holding an umbrella. She rubbed the mud beneath her feet in disgust. Due to her profession, Wu Zhen had been to such places before, but she hadn't been very willing. But as for catching people, she still liked it very much. That was why she hated the youngsters so much. From Wu Zhen's point of view, if it hadn't been for that gay, she wouldn't have been kicked out of the crime squad and wouldn't have been unable to stay in the police force. Fortunately, her father was helping her. Even if she couldn't stay in Jiang City, she could stay in a nearby city. "Let's go in." Wu Zhen held the umbrella and glanced up. "Let me see what secrets that trash from the Fu family has." Su Mei didn't say it because she had only heard some rumors and needed to find evidence. Once she said it, it would be enough to shock the surroundings. If she didn't get rid of the little country bumpkin and He Honghua, she wouldn't be able to vent her hatred. Even though there were staff on duty at this hour, it was a county. However, this was a county town after all. If there was an emergency, it would be sent to the city, not here. Hence, there weren't many people in the hospital. The sound of high heels echoed in the corridor. The staff on duty stood up. Wu Zhen pushed the documents that hadn't been seized forward. "Police investigation, please cooperate." The staff on duty was shocked when he saw that they were from Jiang City. They were a small hospital and didn't even have a doctor-patient relationship. How did they get the higher-ups to investigate? They didn't dare to make the decision. She hurriedly called the hospital director. Both of them waited for a while. In the meantime, Su Mei was still thinking that Miss Wu had used a good move. With such a government document in hand, everything would be solved. The hospital director came quickly. His face was pale, probably because something had happened. When he heard that Wu Zhen was only here to check some information, his heart calmed down. After all, no hospital director would look forward to a visit from the police. But it's not easy to find a file from 17 years ago. The hospital director was telling the truth. It's too far, it's not easy to find. Wu Zhen used to be a police officer, so of course she knew. Every hospital keeps the child's birth certificate. Since the victim gave birth in your hospital, it must be in the file. Yes, but to check for an entire year. Newborns were born every day, especially in that era. There were many of them, so how could they check? Wu Zhen heard that and turned to ask Su Mei. "Do you know when Fu Zhou's birthday is?" "I forgot that too." Su Mei didn't care about that little country bumpkin at all. If that person hadn't suddenly become so difficult to deal with, she wouldn't have come to such a desolate place. Wu Zhen had a bad temper and hated people lying in front of her. Her face turned cold immediately. "You don't even remember the approximate time." Su Mei knew that she couldn't offend her. "Between late spring and late summer." "That's easier to check." The hospital director heaved a long sigh. Although he said that, he knew in his heart that from late spring to late summer, he had to get at least 4 months' worth of files and check slowly. The main reason was that it was from 17 years ago. If it was now, it would be easy to get it by entering it into the computer. What about the name? The more information there was, the faster it would be. Wu Zhen was smart. She felt that since He Honghua was a stranger here, she might have changed the gay's name. Check the birth mother, He Honghua. Okay. The hospital director agreed. But it seems like 4 months' worth of files is really taxing on manpower. We will definitely cooperate, and the police will have to send more people over. Wu Zhen obviously wouldn't tell him that she only had a certificate and couldn't mobilize her colleagues. She said calmly, the police force is limited, the two of us will check here. You just have to cooperate. That will take at least 3 days, the hospital director reminded the police officer. Wu Zhen's eyes were cold. Then let's check for 3 days, as long as it's worth it. The hospital director thought that she meant it would help with the case. He couldn't help but admire the police and cooperate with them. But even if he cooperated, he still had to mobilize the people in charge of the files. This meant that he had to start the investigation the next day. Wu Zhen and Su Mei walked out of the county hospital together. The former stopped and looked at Su Mei. If I can't find anything, Madam Su, even if that gay doesn't deal with you, I will find a way to deal with you. So, Madam Su, you better remember that we are on the same boat. As long as you help me, the Wu family will help you get back those things from the Fu family. Madam Su is a smart person, you should understand this. Su Mei shuddered under the other party's gaze, her entire body turning cold. She finally understood what it meant to work with a tiger. But soon, she felt relieved. Just like what Wu Zhen said, they were in the same boat. Don't worry, we will definitely find something that will shock you. When the two of them were talking, they didn't notice the figure hidden in the night. It was a special force soldier from the Qin family. He came and went without a sound and was good at disguising. He was also someone who could contact Qin Mo directly. But this time, when he was about to report the news to his young master after completing his mission, he suddenly stopped. But no matter how he called, no one picked up. That person's gaze dimmed. He pulled the car door open and followed the Ferrari in front. It seemed like he would have to wait for young master's call to inform him about today's matter. The rain gradually showed signs of letting up. But the night deepened. Jiang City, military courtyard. Bo Jiao had thought that it would take some effort to enter, but unexpectedly, the moment the armed police saw her, they raised the railing. Under normal circumstances, the armed police wouldn't speak, and this time was no exception. But through the bright lights, Bo Jiao still saw the note on his workbook. There were only 5 words, young Master Qin instructed. Bo Jiao glanced at that sentence, shaking off the raindrops on her body. She glanced up at the 2-story building in front of her. Even if it was a ferocious beast. Even if they were destined to be enemies in the future. Now, she wanted to see her little puppy. The entire building was dark. At this hour, Madame Zhang should be asleep. How was she going to enter? Bo Jiao glanced at the tree at the side, then at the full-length window with the curtains drawn and the balcony. She arched a brow, running up the tree and kicking hard with her long legs. Her left hand grabbed onto the railing on the 2nd floor, and with a swing, she threw herself onto the balcony. This series of actions looked especially handsome from the youngster. Of course, such skills weren't available to just anyone. She landed lightly, her left hand supporting herself on the balcony, one knee pressed down, wanting to maintain that position as she walked forward. But it was obvious that as a cat that could eat, bark, and watch over the house, Princess wouldn't allow anyone to pass by his nest. Chapter 755. If she had to describe it. Judging from the princess's current state, she was probably saying, "How dare you disturb my sleep, you unruly commoner." But when he smelled the person in front of him, the originally loud shout turned into a purr. Meow. Why was this weird-smelling fellow here? Bojo stilled when she saw him. She pulled Princess into her arms and placed her index finger on her lips, gesturing for him to be quiet. Princess really didn't like people who tried to establish a relationship with him. He turned his face away arrogantly and started to walk like a cat. Bojo knew she had to coax him. She bent one of her knees and lowered her voice. "It's not convenient this time. I'll feed you fish next time. Why do you like such fishy foods so much?" Princess's eyes lit up when he heard the word fish. He stopped purring and started to use his claws to scratch Bojo's leg. He was obviously saying, "I agree to your bribe, but you have to be honest. What are you trying to do by entering my master's room in the middle of the night? Are you trying to peek at my master's beauty? Tell me." Bojo reached out and pushed him away. She was still looking for tools to break the window. Princess didn't listen and continued to scratch. Bojo carried the cat up. She wanted to threaten him with force since the soft approach didn't work. Just then, she heard a swoosh. The dark-colored curtains were pulled open from her ears. The next moment, she was met with a pair of eyes that were as deep as the night. There was only one person standing in the huge room. Chin-emo. He was obviously different from his usual self. There was a white medical tape on the back of his hand. His skin was almost transparent and his aura was like a respectable sickly prince. He just stared at Bojo. Chin-emo had always been vigilant. Even when he was sick, he wouldn't let his guard down. Hence, the moment a certain someone landed on the ground, he had sensed the commotion outside. But the condition of his body prevented him from getting up immediately. The dream that kept appearing in his mind made it hard for him to tell where he was at that moment. He thought he would hear Princess's call. After all, he was a police cat. Once the princess called, the special forces outside would also come in. From a certain perspective, Chin-emo wasn't worried that someone would really barge into the Chin house. But after listening for a while, there was nothing else other than the princess's gurgling. When he got up and came nearer, he heard someone bribing a cat with a fish. After all, he had not trained the princess well enough. However, he had to admit it. When they heard that familiar voice, the corners of their lips would subconsciously curl up. Chin-emo didn't speak. Perhaps it was because he was sick, even his eyes were a little indifferent. There was nothing more embarrassing than climbing over someone else's wall and being discovered by the other party. Chapter 756. Of course she had to go in. Otherwise, why would she climb over the wall? Bojo replied, "We're going in." She nodded with Princess in tow. The princess stepped forward with her claws. She had an expression that said, "Master, let me explain, I'm threatened." Chin-emo didn't look at him, reaching out to open the locked window. He turned and walked towards the bed. It was obvious that his body hadn't recovered yet. Bojo jumped in effortlessly. But now that she thought about it, she hadn't thought it through. The Almighty had helped her open the window and the cold wind had rushed in. After she landed, she hurriedly closed the window. The youngster looked as though she was afraid Chin-emo would be blown away by the wind. Everything entered Chin-mo's eyes. Even his chest was filled with a feeling that he had never felt before. Warmth, sweetness, and something else. The moment Bojo entered the room, she let Princess play by himself. After all, she was targeting Princess's master. She still remembered that when she had been young, her puppy had been especially weak when he was sick. This was completely different from her. After all, she had been the tyrant of the West Street, invincible among the children. She hadn't been afraid of getting sick at all. In her heart, a perfect person like the Almighty really needed protection. He was good-looking, quiet, and didn't like to talk. Especially when he was lying down, his eyes were especially beautiful. Even now, he was still looking at her, his thin lips slightly lifted. He stood tall like a jade tree, smiling like the bright moon. This was the type of person she described. The Almighty wouldn't be angry with her, right? It was rare for Bojo to be worried about someone else. This was probably the feeling she had ever since she found out that he was her pet. If there was anything she was worried about, it would be that her pet would ignore her for no reason. For example, when she had gone to play ball with someone else. When she had come back to play with him, he had ignored her and even said that only barbarians would play ball. At that time, she had asked him how she wasn't barbarian and that the sport suited her. Her puppy had pinched her face. "Little Bojo, you're hopeless." He had also warned her not to look for him if she wanted to play with someone else. No one else was as good-looking as her puppy, so she wouldn't choose anyone else. It was just that the sound of her typing on the little keyboard was especially loud, and she was afraid that it would affect him. However, upon closer inspection, he didn't seem to be affected by her at all. He also bought her a small sofa with a back. After reading for a while, he would ask her if she was hungry. Never let her lose food at hand. In terms of instructing the servants, the Almighty had a natural talent. He had shown this advantage when he was young. Everything was fine. Until that time, when he ate the food she made and lay on the bed, he wasn't as proud as usual. When his soft hair fell down, he turned into a doll again. However, there wasn't the slightest bit of anger. Only she knew how much she regretted it. It was the same now. When Lin Feng told herself that the Almighty had waited for her in the rain for more than half an hour, back then, she really shouldn't have chased after Rao. "Did you come here just to let me watch you stand?" The clear and hoarse voice rang out again. When Chi Nemo spoke, he could still feel his breath. When he exhaled, it was boiling hot. Chapter 757. Bojo looked at the Almighty and knew he wasn't feeling well. She wasn't bothered by his sharp tongue. Anyway, the Almighty always had a sharp tongue. But when she saw the Almighty looking at her without the blanket, she didn't approve of his actions. Bojo walked over and pulled the blanket over her, wrapping the Almighty up. She didn't play by the rules. Even though Chi Nemo was used to it, he wasn't sure what she would do next. For example, the youngster's sudden approach. The tip of his nose was very close, especially the delicate mole under his eye. It was as though it had brushed past his eyelashes. "Brother Imo, I'm not here to punish you, I'm here to supervise you." The youngster smiled at him. "I climbed the wall because I was afraid I would disturb your rest. If you hadn't woken up, I would have come in long ago." This was the first time Chi Nemo was wrapped in such a manner. He arched a brow but didn't say a word. On the other hand, Bojo could feel the warmth in his breath. She touched his wrist through the blanket. She didn't touch him directly because her pet had always been clean. Since she climbed the wall, her hand would definitely be wet. Moreover, she was cold, so it wasn't suitable for her to touch him directly. Bojo was always meticulous with the people she placed in her heart. Even when she checked the temperature of Chi Mo's forehead, she placed the back of her hand against it, afraid there would be rainwater on her palm. Chi Nemo watched the youngster's movements. On that sickly handsome face, there was a rare hint of childish arrogance. Bojo didn't think much of it, assuming the Almighty disliked her. "Is it because my hand is too cold?" With that, Bojo wanted to retract her hand to cool down before testing the Almighty again. Unexpectedly, she didn't move. Her fingers were pressed down by someone. Chi Nemo shut his eyes, replying faintly, "It's not cold." In his eyes, everything about the youngster was good. Even the raindrops he didn't like seemed different when he was so close to her. "It's comfortable." A cold temperature was just right for a person with a fever. Bojo didn't move when her pet said it was comfortable. She dutifully switched to her other hand. How about this? He couldn't control his laughter. Even if he was tired. Whatever he said, the other party believed it. This feeling was indeed very good. Bojo glanced down. When she saw the smile on his face, she smiled as well. He finally heaved a sigh of relief. Back then, she hadn't taken good care of him. He couldn't let anyone get sick now. As he thought about it, he switched his left hand to his right. However, his forehead still felt hot. And the Almighty seemed to be asleep. Chi Nemo had indeed fallen asleep. His joints were aching, something that everyone with a high fever would experience. Another reason was exhaustion. He needed to rest well at this time. However, the family doctor of the Chin family knew very well. Chapter 758. In certain aspects, Bojo was indeed a suitable pillow. As long as she was around, Chi Nemo would feel relaxed. But Bojo was still worried that the rain would affect the Almighty. Moreover, the temperature on the back of his hand didn't seem to be decreasing. Bojo narrowed her eyes. She lifted her hand gently. Then she walked towards the bathroom. Her steps were slow, trying not to exert any strength. She turned on the hot water and soaked the towel. She took off her jacket and grabbed Chin Mo's jacket from the hanger to wear it. It seemed like she wasn't going to sleep. Once she was done, she fished the towel out. Twisted it a few times, and covered Chin Mo's forehead with the steaming hot towel. In order not to appear rude, Bojo didn't make a sound. Princess watched from the side, patrolling as though he was warning her. It was as though he was saying, "Don't even think about doing anything when Master isn't able to resist." Bojo's attention was on the Almighty. She wasn't in the mood to look at Princess. She pressed the corner of the blanket, her gaze landing on the medical tape on his left hand. She reached out to touch it. When she felt that it was about time, she removed the towel and entered the bathroom to soak it in hot water again. But this time, she soaked 2 towels, the other covering the Almighty's left joint. To an esports player, the hand was the most important. Besides, the hot compress had the effect of reducing the fever. Just like that, he repeated the same action. The clock hanging on the wall kept turning. The rain outside didn't stop. Chi Nemo was still out of the dream. But this time, it was much gentler. There wasn't the river that could drown a person. Instead, there was a soft thing in his arms. Every time it pounced on him, it would call him indifferently. That. Who exactly was it? The more he wanted to know the answer, the easier it was to wake up. When Chi Nemo opened his eyes, he realized that there was someone beside him. That person was afraid that he was cold, so she covered his left wrist with her right hand. That face was usually infuriating, but right now, it was as obedient as it could be. Chi Nemo reached out, his fingertips caressing the youngster's face. It felt like milk, soft and smooth. Chi Nemo leaned over, wanting to do something. However, he soon paused. Even though he was very tired, he knew subconsciously that he was having a fever and that he couldn't pass it on to a certain someone. However, he couldn't let this fellow sleep like this. Using the last of his remaining thoughts, he pulled the quilt. Both of them were wrapped in it. Chi Nemo rubbed his chin against Bojo's soft hair, his eyes closing once more. His side profile was still cold, but his aura was completely different. On the same bed, hugging from behind always seemed especially warm. However, this also depended on the time and place. The next morning, just after dawn, Chapter 759. It was rare for Madame Zhang to be in such a daze. She had been staying on the first floor, near the door. She hadn't heard anything. Moreover, because of the young master's matter, she had been very attentive the whole night. How did young Master Jiu end up on her young master's bed? Bo Jiu could read Madame Zhang's gaze. But there wasn't much hope for Bo Jiu to admit that she was good at climbing walls. A handsome face broke into a smile. He landed lightly and took the bowl of porridge from Madame Zhang's hands calmly. It smells so good. Let Brother Mo have some when he wakes up. Madame Zhang knew that her young master's temper wasn't something an ordinary person could handle. With young Master Jiu around, it would be better. But Madame Zhang wasn't assured. She said in a low voice, "I'll have to trouble young Master Jiu to take his temperature later. I'm not sure if his fever has subsided and young master didn't allow us to watch over him." Madame Zhang had a lot of instructions, but Bo Jiu didn't lose her patience. She stood at the side and listened attentively before replying, "His fever should have subsided. I've changed a few towels and when Brother Mo wakes up, I'll take his temperature again. I'll get him to drink more water and watch him eat a few mouthfuls of porridge." Madame Zhang heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you, young Master Jiu." Madame Zhang knew that even though her young master seemed polite, it was because of his upbringing. But from a certain perspective, his temper wasn't good. Especially when he had just woken up. Fortunately, young Master Jiu was around. In front of young Master Jiu, her young master would always reveal his most popular side. But when Madame Zhang left the room, she was still wondering how Bo Jiu had entered. Perhaps Auntie Zhang had been a righteous person all her life and didn't know how to climb over walls. Therefore, no matter how she thought about it, she felt that there was something wrong with the door. After all, in Auntie Zhang's heart, young Master Jiu had always been a well-mannered and pretty kid. How could he do such a thing? Bo Jiu's expression didn't change in the slightest in the face of Madame Zhang's trust. To a wall-climbing student, climbing a wall wasn't a big deal. After sending Madame Zhang off, Bo Jiu turned towards the only bed in the room. The person on the bed had not woken up yet. His black hair was scattered messily, revealing half of his well-defined face. His thick eyelashes drooped down, casting a dark shadow. His outstanding facial features seemed especially harmless at this time. Bo Jiu liked seeing the Almighty like this. Whether it was the Almighty when he was young or the Almighty when he grew up. He wanted to put down the porridge and admire it for a while longer. She didn't expect the moment she took action. That person said, "Why don't you tell Auntie Zhang how you got in, wall-climbing genius?" Chapter 760. When had she touched it? She couldn't even test the temperature through the blanket. Bo Jiu's gaze was clear. Qin Mo ignored her. "I'm hungry." The Almighty wanted to eat porridge. Bo Jiu was smart. Even if she hadn't fed others porridge before, she had fed her pet before. Now that he had grown up, he felt pressured. But at the same time, he still looked good. Bo Jiu took the spoon and blew on it before passing it to Qin Mo. Those who didn't know would think Qin Mo was seriously injured. In reality, it was just a fever. But the youngster was taking care of him with a serious expression as though she had completed a huge task. When Qin Mo lowered his lids to eat the porridge, he gave off a fragile beauty. At that moment, Bo Jiu thought to herself that she couldn't let others see the Almighty's cold, it was too alluring. Qin Mo noticed the youngster's gaze drifting over. His voice was calm. "What naughty thoughts are you having again?" Bo Jiu smiled. "What naughty thoughts can I have?" Protecting her pet was one of her missions. Feed him another mouthful. You can eat the rest. Qin Mo reached out to stop her. He had lost his appetite from the fever, so how could he be hungry? He just wanted to see how the youngster was going to feed him. "You're not eating anymore." Bojo glanced at the bowl. She remembered Madame Zhang's instructions and smiled faintly. "Have a few more mouthfuls." Qin Mo arched a brow. He tilted his head and took the business magazine over. His posture was steady. It was obvious he wasn't going to eat anymore. Bojo wondered why he was still the same as when he was young. He was so hard to deal with and yet, he was so arrogant. Back then, she had wanted to pounce on him and beat him up. It wasn't without reason. But now, she could only coax him. Bojo said, "Brother Mo, eat more. I'll play with you." Qin Mo replied, "I'm done with the revival match." "What about singing?" "The wall-jumping student wants to show off his flirting skills again." "Ha!" Qin Mo placed the magazine down and smiled at her. His lips weren't warm at all. Was he still angry at her? Bojo didn't know what to do since she hadn't expected the Almighty to wait for her after witnessing that scene. Qin Mo glanced at the dejected youngster in front of him. The more he looked up, the more he felt that this person really didn't know how to take advantage of the situation. He lifted his lid slightly, the business magazine in front of his legs still open. He sat as though he was in an international conference, pointing out the situation. "Since you have so many conditions, why don't you let me kiss you?" His voice was very light and indifferent. Bojo glanced up. Other than the Almighty, there was no other person in the world who would use such a tone to say such things. The two of them stared at each other. In the end, Bojo finished the bowl of porridge herself. Qin Mo closed the magazine and looked out the window. The happiness on the corner of his mouth had obviously decreased. To Bojo, it wasn't a big deal. At that time, he could flirt with the Almighty because he didn't have any ideas. The reason why he wasn't flirting with her now was precisely because he had his own ideas. She was afraid that she would really snatch the Almighty away when she left. She often planned this. No matter how he avoided the police or how he avoided the security personnel, he could just get a private jet. Everything would be fine once they passed through the customs. But more importantly, even if she did all that, the Almighty was a dangerous person. She hadn't even reached America. The traces left by the Almighty would probably be enough for the crime squad to find her. Even though she shouldn't have the thought of kidnapping him. Chapter 761. Bojo sunk into her thoughts, her gaze sweeping over the thermometer at the side. After a moment, she brought it to the Almighty along with the cold medicine. Qin Mo took the medicine cooperatively, his expression making it hard for Bojo to tell if he was happy or unhappy. But after taking the medicine, he didn't touch the thermometer, looking as though he could do it himself if she wanted his temperature. Bojo felt that the time to test her gentlemanly character had arrived. She had to strip the Almighty personally, she had to take it easy. Bojo picked up the thermometer and swung it. When the mercury reached a suitable temperature, she pressed her long legs against the blanket, her left hand reaching for Qin Mo's pajamas. However, he was still very well behaved and unbuttoned the top button. Qin Mo placed the magazine down, looking at the youngster with a deep gaze. "Do you think this is accurate?" He exerted force, placing the youngster's palm on his chest. Bojo's ears flushed when the temperature reached her. The youngster was still proper, sticking to her position as she stuffed the thermometer into Qin Mo's armpit. She retracted her hand quickly, but when she remembered that she would have to go through another round of seduction when she took the thermometer out, Bojo felt that it was a test. Qin Mo didn't force her too much. Actually, it was enough as long as a certain someone appeared. When she lowered her head, she could see the youngster's side profile as she pulled out the thermometer. How could this youngster think of climbing over the wall to visit a patient? 37, 6 degrees, he still has a slight fever. Bojo frowned, pulling the blanket over him. Rest for another day. Before Chin Mo could reply, Bojo stood up. She stuffed a hand into her pocket and dialed Feng Yi's number. I won't be going today. He still has a fever. Me? Of course, I won't be going either. I have to look after Brother Mo. Send me the National League's information, I'll take a look at it with Brother Mo. Feng Yi had only wanted Little Spade to look after him for a day. How did it turn into 2 days? He knew he wouldn't be able to leave. Even if Little Spade wanted to leave, a certain someone would find a way to stay. But it wasn't a direct method. Chin Mo was indeed thinking of a reason to force the youngster to stay if she wanted to leave. Now that he received such a call, the corners of his mouth curled up. Especially that sentence. Me? Of course, I won't go either. I want to look after Brother Mo. It was pleasing to the ear. Bojo wasn't good at taking care of others. Other than when she was attentive towards Chin Mo, she was indeed more manly in other aspects. For example, the princess was also hungry and meowed at the young man, asking him to fulfill his promise to feed her fish. Bojo thought for a moment. The princess was overjoyed. After that, Bojo poured some water for it. Drink it. Princess. I've already taken off my fur, and you're showing me this. Chin Mo lay on the bed, watching the interaction between the cat and the human. He had wanted to call Feng Yi, but he retracted his hand. Since a certain someone was willing to stay, there was no need for him to think of other ways. However, there were 3 missed calls on the screen. Chin Mo's eyes darkened. Then, he looked up and glanced at the young man. The hand under the quilt was texting. Only 3 words, what is it? The Special Forces soldier on the other side of the phone had been waiting for news from the top. Chapter 762. Wu Zhen and Su Mei are investigating young Master Zhou's background. The moment he saw that sentence, Chin Mo's eyes were like the night that could devour everything, dark and cold. Address, details. The moment the Special Forces soldier saw those words, he knew it wasn't convenient for his young master to call. In fact, the Special Forces soldier didn't address Chin Mo as young master just because he was the only son of the Chin family. There was another reason. Not many knew. When it came to international cases, Chin Mo's codename was Young Master. His subordinates would always address him as Young Master when they sent messages. Back then, Chin Mo had been young, a high school student, but he had become an unpredictable detective. That wasn't all, many international cases had been handled by Young Master. After so many years, even Director Huang hadn't known. Chin Mo's authority had always been above the crime squad. Of course, the Special Forces soldiers he led weren't simple either. After realizing the problem, the Special Forces soldier dialed Chin Mo's number. I'm at a county hospital in the southeast of Jiang City. Wu Zhen used her police badge and is investigating something. Even though I'm not sure of the specifics, she got someone to investigate young Master Zhou's birth data. Last night, they got the hospital director to look into it again. What should we do? Chin Mo's voice was low and deep. Young Master, it's not convenient over there. Listen to me. I'm at a county hospital in the southeast of Jiang City. While Chin Mo was on the phone, Bojo glanced over at him. Chin Mo replied as though he was dealing with a business matter. Since someone is looking for trouble, let's cut her off. It was a code word. Those who worked under Chin Mo could naturally tell what he was talking about. I'll contact the local troops and get them to send someone over to deal with this. More importantly, someone was abusing his identity as a criminal police officer after leaving his post. The Special Forces soldier narrowed his eyes. Indeed, it's time to get serious. Do as you see fit. Qin Mo flipped through the business magazine, his attitude nonchalant. Remember to send me the information after you cut her off. As for the rest, do as you please. The Special Forces soldier felt a chill down his spine as he listened to the voice on the other side. This time, young master must be really angry. Director Huang had made a huge mistake. Or perhaps it had nothing to do with Director Huang, it was a problem with the system. Because Wu Zhen's surname was Wu, they did not follow the procedure to collect her documents. He was still thinking of switching levels. The Special Forces soldier shook his head and jumped into the car door like a leopard. Even when he was driving, he had this kind of drive. From this, one could see. Qin Mo, who could command such a person at any time, was never simple. Bo Jiu was still watching the Almighty. Chapter 763. Looking at it from his angle. The youngster was lowering her head and stirring something. After a while, she asked, Brother Mo, I'll use your computer to receive the video Feng Yi is sending. Qin Mo closed the magazine. Bo Jiu placed her phone at the side. It wasn't locked and the screen was still lit up. The screen was a photo of them on the bed. Qin Mo watched as the screen slowly darkened. Warmth finally returned to his eyes. Bo Jiu was a hacker that respected privacy. The moment she saw the lock on the laptop, she turned to glance at Qin Mo. Her hands itched to unlock the lock before she locked the laptop again. Brother Mo, what's the password? Mo Jiu, go all out. Qin Mo glanced up, his eyes curved. You solved it once, didn't you remember? Bo Jiu. She had been so focused on solving it for fun that she hadn't paid attention to the password. But Mo Jiu. That was the password. The youngster paused for a moment before lowering her head to fiddle with the laptop. It seemed as though she was forcing herself to do something. Fortunately, receiving a document was a breeze for her. There's a match between the foreign teams. Bo Jiu glanced at the notes, arching a brow. She lifted the laptop with one hand and placed it on the bed. She sat down so Qin Mo wouldn't have to get up to see it. Qin Mo swept a glance over the characters on the screen. The Japanese. It wasn't the right time to mention this team. Both of them still remembered the scene from yesterday. Fortunately, Qin Mo didn't linger on this topic. Let's go back and take a look at the operation. Bo Jiu was naturally more active and less talkative. Gradually, the two of them focused their attention on the analysis of the operation. At the same time, Supreme Alliance was playing the same video. After watching it, there was dead silence. Feng Yi pushed up his glasses and switched off the device in his hand. That's amazing. Someone couldn't help but comment. Even Yun, who didn't refute. Feng Yi was a sly fox, be it in the business world or in the meeting. I'm showing you this to make you realize that even though the revival match is easy, the National League isn't as simple as it seems. You are the last team to make it to the finals. Compared to Supreme Alliance, the other 9 teams aren't to be underestimated, not to mention the Japanese on the international server. This isn't enough. Be vigilant in times of peace. This was what Feng Yi wanted to tell them. Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao looked at each other and clenched their fists. The stronger the opponent, the more he could stimulate his fighting strength. This was not a lie. After watching the video, the atmosphere in Supreme Alliance changed. Those who practiced hand speed, and those who studied tactics. Feng Yi walked out of the conference room with a faint smile. The club director who was following him was still very worried. CEO Feng, what rank do you think we can get this time? Feng Yi paused. I thought Director Zhang had always known Supreme Alliance's target. Hearing this, Minister Zhang was stunned and smiled bitterly. CEO Feng always seems to be so confident. You saw it just now. The opponent is too strong. So what? Feng Yi glanced over. Supreme Alliance has always been strong against strong opponents. The stronger you meet, the stronger you become. When Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao walked out and heard those words, their chests felt hot. That's right, you're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.